I'm Dwayne Lester, and this is The Paradigm Shift. On November 11th, at a press conference where he delivered prepared statements, Governor Jay Nixon said this:
"Violence will not be tolerated. The residents and businesses of this region will be protected."
But violence was tolerated deliberately, and those businesses weren't protected. They were left to burn by a governor who couldn't be reached by anyone. Well, anyone except Valerie Jarrett at the White House. And since the decision was made to let the cities of Delwood and Ferguson go up in flames, Governor Jay Nixon has been in full CYA mode. His go-to spin is to point out that no lives were lost. Just recently, he callously said, quote, "Those buildings and businesses will be rebuilt, but to say that that night we should have had a larger and broader gunfight, that would not have solved any problems," unquote. And risking a dislocated shoulder from patting himself on the back for letting bands of thugs run wild in the streets, he said, quote, "In the hierarchy of responsibilities, saving lives was first. Behind it was saving property. That was the right way to come at that," unquote. Now here's the paradigm shift. Governor Nixon knows that's not true. He just thinks you're stupid enough to believe it. Nixon has presented what's known as a false dilemma. It's when an argument is made that assumes only two possible outcomes. In this case, Nixon wants us to believe that his choices were A, to have the National Guard on the streets of Ferguson, where they would have obviously killed people like mindless uniformed spree killers, or B, to turn the area over to professional anarchists, revolutionaries, and random looters and joiners who didn't want to let a crisis go to waste. But there are other possible outcomes, like the fact the mere presence of the National Guard would have stopped a lot of this from even being considered in the first place. Oh, but the Adjutant General said it would just put the National Guard in danger, they'll say. Well, that's an interesting statement. But first, let's consider that the position of Adjutant General is an appointed position, and Stephen Danner was appointed by Governor Jay Nixon. Second, it completely ignores the military strategy used for centuries known as deterrence. And on the streets of Ferguson, deterrence worked. Who could forget the photo taken of Mike Gutierrez and Adam Weinstein, who stood outside of St. Louis Ink Tattoo Studio and County Guns, armed with black guns? Looters pillaged a nearby Dollar General at the same strip mall as those stores, but took one look at the rifles and the men holding them and thought better about trying anything. And that was in August, months before the riots Nixon allowed to happen. But let's assume Danner is right, and the mob would have just attacked the guardsmen rather than being smart and backing away slowly. Does that mean the property owners of Ferguson have to have their rights violated because a bunch of looters made a bad choice? That only makes sense to those who have no use for the rule of law. The simple fact is, when you choose to take an action, you choose to accept the consequences of said action. Therefore, it follows that if you choose to throw a firebomb at a person wielding an AR-15, you choose to be perforated by the person you're attempting to set on fire. Not only that, but the business doesn't burn because the other firebombers choose to live, and the firefighters can actually do their job without being left out on the dangle. Nixon's first responsibility was to the law-abiding citizens. Instead, he chose to abandon them. What happened in Ferguson wasn't because Jay Nixon made a decision to place life above property. It happened because somewhere between November 11th, when he promised to protect the businesses of Ferguson and warned that violence would not be tolerated, and November 24th, the night where violence was most assuredly tolerated, Nixon, and most likely Team Obama, placed optics above the rights of the people they had sworn to protect, leaving those people to fend for themselves. It wasn't because Nixon wanted to protect the pillagers from the National Guard. It was because someone, somewhere, placed optics above the rights of the people of Delwood and Ferguson. Someone, somewhere, was comfortable with those communities burning, with those businesses being destroyed, and the lives of those tax-paying citizens being turned upside down, as long as there wasn't a photo of an anarchist being gassed. On November 24th, politics took priority over protecting the people. That's the paradigm shift. I'm Dwayne Lester.
If you enjoyed this video and would like to see more of them in the future, please consider making a donation to the Missouri Torch here. And please subscribe to our new YouTube channel and visit us at themissouritorch.com.